guys, so last week we learned exactly how to read a triple beam balance, and today we're going to actually learn how to physically use a triple beam balance. Remember, a triple beam balance is a scientific instrument that we are able to make quantitative observations, and the reason for that is because quantitative observations are dealing with numbers, okay? So a triple beam balance measures the mass of an object. Mass and weight are completely different. We're going to get into it, but remember, a triple beam balance measures the mass of an object, and we use grams, which is that little G right there. So, if you notice, okay, everybody look over here. If you notice, we have this pointer, which is below the 0 mark. The whole goal here using a triple beam balance is to balance out the object. We need to make sure that this line is balanced and lined up to the 0. So if you noticed here, there is absolutely nothing on the pan, okay? The pan is where you place the object. There's nothing on the pan right now. So the line itself is below the 0, and the reason why is because we have weights not at 0. The first step is to make sure all of these weights are directly at 0. So the first step is to make sure that all the weights are slid and slided over to the left at the 0 mark, okay? The second step to a triple beam balance is to make sure that the balance itself is calibrated. And what do I mean by calibrated? I mean that this line, the pointer, is exactly lined up to the 0. So if you notice, the line is above the 0, yet there's nothing on the pan. And the reason for that is because it's not calibrated. We need to adjust the triple beam balance to make sure it's calibrated. And the way we do that is if you look over here, we have an adjustment knob. This adjustment knob causes the beam to move up and down and allows us to calibrate the triple beam balance. So you can either move it to the left or you can move it to the right. Okay, so I'm going to move it a little bit, and if you notice as I move it, the balance is almost at the mark, so I want to continue moving it to the same way I was just moving it, and the whole object here is to get that mark exactly at 0. So if you notice here right now, as I move it a little bit longer, if you notice right now, the beam, the line right there, the pointer is lined up exactly with the 0. So we're ready to measure the mass of an object. So say hi to my creepy doll. She's waving to you guys. I expect you guys to wave back to her. Be nice, guys, okay? She's not that creepy, but we're gonna measure the creepy doll's mass. All right. So the way we do that is we're gonna take the mass, we're gonna take the doll, and we're gonna place it on the pan. All right. So we're ready to go. Move her weird hair out of the way. So we're ready to go. So how do we use the triple beam balance? So if you notice, once I place that object on the pan, the line is now above the 0, and the reason for that is because there is a certain mass on this left side which is bringing this beam up. So we need to balance out the beam so that the line is directly lined up to the 0. So the first beam you start with, and you always start with, is the hundredths beam or the middle beam. And if you notice, okay, if you notice, this arrow right here is directly on a number, okay? And also, if you notice on the beams, there's grooves, okay? There are grooves for the tens, for the hundredths, and for the tenths. So you want to make sure that this arrow is pointed directly at a number, and it fits, and you can actually feel it fit into the groove and almost hear it click in. So the first thing we want to start with is the hundredths, and you want to slide it one by one until this beam falls below 0. So I'm going to move this beam right here to my hundredths. Now if you look, this cannot move anywhere because it's in the groove, and if you look, the arrow is directly on the 100. So I'm going to leave it and see what happens. So if you notice that this fell below the 0, that's telling me that this mass is too much for the doll. The doll weighs less than 100 grams. So since this is below 0, I need to move this slider back to 0. So I am done with the hundredths. My next beam I want to start with, I am not coming back here until I measure another object. I'm done using this beam. The next beam you want to start with is the tens, okay? So the way we do this is you move it one by one. So I'm going to move it to the 10, Notice that the arrow is directly at the number and it's fit into its groove. So I'm going to leave it at the 10. If you notice that it is still above 0, that's indicating and telling me that this doll's mass is more than 10. So you're going to continue to move to 20. Still above 0, telling me that it's more than 20 grams, the doll, so I can move to 30. Still above 0, so I'm going to move to 40. Still above 0, so that's telling me I can move up to 50. So I moved up to 50, but if you notice the line, the indicator, the pointer fell below 0, telling me that the mass of 50 is too much for the doll. The doll has a mass less than 50 grams. There makes no sense. I do not have to move up to 60 because I already know that 50 is too much for the doll. So the way I do this now with the 10s is I'm going to slide back one number and I'm done with the 10s. I'm leaving it at that number. I know for a fact that the doll has a mass between 40 and 50 grams. Okay, so if you look, it is not balanced at the 0 yet, so it's a little bit more than 50, but less than, a little bit more than 40, but less than 50. So I'm done with the 10s, I'm done with the 100s, and the last beam I'm moving with the 1s, okay? So the way I do the 1s, you just want to slide it nice and gently. And if you notice, as I slide this, you will see the beam will start to balance and move up and down. So right now, I'm in between 5 and 6, but the beam, the indicator is still not at 0. It's a little bit too much, so I'm going to slide it back a little bit. And now I am pretty much at the 0 marker. The line is lined up with the 0. So now we are good. Everything is balanced. We have a balance. The line is at the 0. The doll's good to go. Now we're completely balanced. Now you want to use what you learned last week. Okay. Now we need to figure out how much the doll's mass is. So the way we do that, guys, we learned this last week, is by adding all the beams together. So I am at 40 for the 10s, 0 at the 100s. So 40 plus 0 is 40. Now the 1s, which is the hardest one to read. If you notice, there are little lines between the whole numbers, okay? So I am past the 5, and I'm at one little line past the 5. The little lines are your decimal points. So I'm at 5.1. And the reason I got the 0.1 is because it is one little line past the 5. Okay, so I'm going to add 5.1 to 40. So 40 plus 5 is 45, and now add 0.1. I'm going to get 45.1 grams. Make sure you label your units. So my doll